Whether you are a digital entrepreneur, a freelancer or consultant, a digital nomad, a startup, or the owner of an already existing business offering digital or physical products in almost any industry and from anywhere in the world basically, then becoming an Estonian e-resident and establishing your company in Estonia may be beneficial to you. The fully digital nature enables you to have a very quick and location-independent registration and onboarding process without any frustrating paperwork or the usual crazy bureaucracy that comes with setting up a company in almost any other place in the world. Add to this the comparatively low share capital contribution that can even be paid in installments. And to round it all off, you can benefit from Estonia's unique corporate tax system where no taxes will be levied on retained and reinvested profits. But let's start at the beginning. I'm going to briefly explain what the Estonian e-Residency program is and how and why it came to be. Then I'm going to walk you through the entire process of how it works, how long it takes and how much it costs. Everything from the application process and the selection of a service provider to receiving your e-residency card and registering your company. And we're also going to talk about banking and taxes. Last but not least, I'm going to be sharing my personal experience of being an e-resident and running my company in Estonia over the last 3 years. For your convenience, there will be timestamps for each chapter in the video description. And whenever you see one of these reference numbers pop up on the screen, you can find the corresponding link down below as well. One last thing here before we go into the details, I also want to make clear what e-residency is not and who it is not for. For one, e-residency is a digital identity that enables you to identify yourself online and access Estonia's digital services from anywhere in the world so that you can establish an Estonian company online, sign and authenticate contracts digitally, etc. This is to say that e-residency is not a physical identification or a travel document. It is not a visa and does not confer citizenship, tax residency, residence or right of entry to Estonia or the European Union. So the term e-residency is maybe a bit of a misnomer that could cause confusion. Calling it e-identity would probably be more appropriate. And for another, the Estonian business environment is very transparent and the country is among those with the lowest risk of money laundering. So if you are thinking of doing something shady or outright illegal, like evading taxes, stop watching this video because then this is not for you. To everyone else, welcome and let's dive in now. The e-Residency program was launched by Estonia almost 8 years ago in December 2014. And by doing so, it became the first country in the world that issued a digital identity to a person who lived beyond its borders. While the mission of the program is to provide Estonia's unique digital services to empower entrepreneurs and transform how business is done globally, and gain more e-residents of course, the purpose is to increase the number of active enterprises in Estonia. At the time of recording this video, there are now over 90,000 people from more than 170 countries who have become e-residents and have established more than 22,000 companies. The fact that this was achieved by Estonia of all places, this small European country with a population of just 1.3 million, comes as no surprise however. Back in the year 2000, every school in the country was online and as the first country in the world, the government declared internet access to be a human right, which led to Estonia becoming the most advanced digital society in the world, with 99% of the country's public services being online. Now, besides all the unique benefits of becoming an e-resident that I already mentioned at the beginning, imagine you set up your company in your home country and then you decide to move abroad. In most cases, you would have now to close your company and re-establish it at your new place of residence. Not so with your location-independent Estonian company. You move, your company stays. Also, if you plan to enter or expand to the European market with your business, setting up your company in Estonia would enable you to access financial services or EU funding, trade in euro, etc. And of course, as an e-resident, you can network with like-minded entrepreneurs all over the world. Remember, there's already more than 90,000 of us. Now let's first look at an overview of the entire process to get a clear picture of how this all works. After that, we will get into the details of each step. Broadly speaking, we need to look into these three main areas: e-residency, company, and banking. So first, there is the e-residency application process. This is the most important part because without becoming an e-resident, you cannot access Estonia's digital services and therefore you cannot establish your company there. But as I just said, we'll get to all that in a minute. Once you are granted e-residency, you can proceed to the company registration process. As you are an e-resident at this point, registering your company is a quick and easy procedure and can be done entirely online. However, before you do that, you need to select a service provider that will act as the messenger between your company and the local authorities. Again, we will talk about the why and the how. Now, I need to mention at this point that these first two steps, your e-residency application and the selection of a service provider, can in some cases also be done in reverse. This, however, is determined by a number of factors that I'm going to explain, and I will also talk about it when I share my personal experience of becoming an e-resident towards the end of the video. And the last step of establishing your business in Estonia is to set up your business bank accounts so that you can make and receive payments. Now that you have an idea of how this works, let's take a closer look at each step and start with the e-residency application process. Your application for the Estonian e-residency is quick and easy and obviously done completely online, except for one of the steps which in my opinion could be considered the only downside of the whole application process. What I'm talking about is that if you are granted e-residency, you need to pick up your e-residency kit in person at an Estonian embassy abroad or directly in Estonia. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and go through the process step by step. Step 1. Prepare your documents. First, make sure you have all the required information ready before you start the online application process. It makes things much easier when you are well prepared. As you can see here in the official application guidelines, the process will take around 30 minutes if you have prepared the following things in advance, which I highly recommend you do. So what you need to prepare is a statement of your main motivation to become an e-resident, your up-to-date CV, a description of your planned business activity, a copy of your identity document, a passport-style digital photo meeting the requirements explained on the e-residency website, and a credit card to pay your application fee. Step 2. Create your account. Once you're ready, read all the information on the available application website carefully and then create your account by using your email. Again, the link to this website will be down below. Step 3. Complete your application. Then go through the online application process and complete the forms with the information and data you prepared. One very important step in the process is the selection of the pickup location. This is where you plan to pick up your e-residency digital ID card. There are currently around 45 pickup locations available worldwide. As you can see on this map, most of the pickup locations at the time are located in Europe. Make sure you select the location where you can travel to. I want to clearly repeat again what I said in the intro. E-residency does not give you any right to enter another country just because you have to pick up your e-residency kit. Picking up your e-residency kit, which is your digital identity card and the card reader, is the one and only step in the entire e-residency application process that currently requires you to show up in person at an Estonian embassy. Maybe this will change at some point in the future, making this in-person pickup unnecessary if, for example, new or different identification methods become available or are introduced. Maybe then the collection can be replaced by a simple delivery of your e-residency kit. We will see. Step 4. Pay and submit your application. Once you have completed the online forms and are ready to submit your application, you proceed to the payment of the state fee for your application, which at the time of recording is either €100 if you've chosen to pick up your e-residency kit in Estonia, or €120 if you are going to pick up your e-residency kit in a foreign representation of Estonia anywhere else in the world. Step 5. Application review. After you have paid and submitted your application, the Estonian Police and Border Guard Board will now conduct a required background check and review your application. You will get notified by email when this process is completed, which you can expect to be in around 3 to 8 weeks. Step 6. Pick up your e-residency kit. If you are granted e-residency, you will then be invited by email to collect your e-residency kit at the location you selected in the application process. What you need to bring with you is your identity document that you used in your application. Then your fingerprints will be collected and you receive your e-residency kit, which again is your digital identity card and the card reader. And that's it. Welcome to our global community of Estonian e-residents. Now, after receiving your digital ID card, which is valid for 5 years by the way, it can take up to 24 hours for it to be activated. Included in your e-residency kit, you will find instructions on how to check the activation status of your card and also how to install the digital ID software on your computer so that you are ready to use it and access Estonia's e-services and establish your company online. But one more time, I'll put links to all of this down below. Now that you are an e-resident, you can register your company entirely online from wherever you are. And this whole process, from submitting your registration to getting the confirmation from the e-business register, only takes from a few hours to a maximum of 2 to 3 days. However, and this is very important to mention here, up until now the whole process was more or less the same for everyone because becoming an e-resident is the basis for everything else that follows now, which for most people is to register a company in Estonia. But from here on, things can be quite different because of the countless possible combinations of business models, products, positioning, industry, company size, number of shareholders, and so on. Because of this, I now need to state very clearly what we are going to be talking about so that we are all on the same page. We are talking about the registration of a private limited company. This legal form is similar to LTD or LLC structures in the UK or the US respectively. There are of course other business forms, but the private limited company is the most common business entity among both Estonian residents and e-Residents. We are talking about a company that does not have its main business activities in tourism, financial services, educational activities, or construction-related areas. The reason for that is that these business activities, among some others, require you to apply for additional licenses. One last point, if you are planning to register a multi-shareholder company, all co-founders must be e-Residents in order to be able to complete the registration online. Most common among e-Residents, however, is the registration of a single shareholder company with only one founder. This is usually the case for freelancers, consultants, digital nomads, and other forms of digital solopreneurs. So now that we've got this out of the way, let's get into the details. And just as in the previous chapter, I'll walk you through the next steps where we're going to talk about the service providers I mentioned earlier and the registration process for your company. Step 1. Be prepared. When you applied for your e-residency, you had to prepare and submit a description of your business activity. And now that you're about to register your company, you might have to refine this description again so that you are well prepared for the next step, which is to select a suitable service provider. But it's your business after all, so it shouldn't be a problem for you to elaborate on it. Besides the description of your business and its main area of activity, you also need to decide on a name for your company that is unique, which means it cannot be too similar or overlap with existing companies. You also want to make sure that your desired domain name is available so that you can use it for your website. I leave links both to the Estonian EU Business Register and my favorite domain name registrar below so that you can check the name you are planning to use. Step 2. Select a service provider. You've heard me talk about service providers a few times in this video and you may still be wondering what in the world I mean by that. So let me clear things up. While there is no requirement to appoint a local director for your company, you are legally required to have a local address and a local contact person in Estonia who acts as a messenger between your company and the local authorities. And that's exactly where service providers come in. Now, a service provider not only assumes the role of your local contact, they can also take over many other administrative tasks and manage the back end of your company, which means that everything from accounting, compliance, taxes, annual reporting, etc. is completely done for you. And just this alone can save you many hours of your valuable time each month. Also, I think I definitely should mention this here. It's very important to understand that only you are always in full control of your company. You are the owner and the management board member of your company with full control and legal responsibility. The local contact person, your service provider, can never make any decisions on behalf of your company. Only you can. What you see here is the e-Residency marketplace. Link will be down below. This is a fantastic platform where you can find an ever-growing number of trusted service providers for e-Residents that offer all kinds of services from virtual offices, which is your required local contact, to finance and accounting, administration, HR, taxes and legal, banking and payments. You can filter, search and compare different providers to find suitable ones for your business. Remember when I said just a few minutes ago? But from here on, things can be quite different because of the countless possible combinations of business models, products, positioning, industry, company size, number of shareholders, and so on. This is to say that your path forward is now determined by your plans and your individual situation. The most suitable service provider for you depends on the kind of business you want to establish, your company size, the kinds of products or services you sell, the industry you're in, etc. Also keep in mind that all these service providers here are private companies as well, so they decide their own onboarding criteria, services and restrictions. They can freely choose to take on or refuse customers. Just to give you an example here, the service provider I've been using since the foundation of my company is this one here, Solo. By the way, I will talk a bit more about my personal experience with Solo a bit later in the video. Now, when we look at the details of this particular service provider, we can see here under restrictions it says selling physical goods, Amazon FBA. What this means is that if you are selling any physical goods in your business, which also includes dropshipping for example, And as explicitly stated here, Amazon FBA, you cannot use Solo as your service provider. The reason why I'm able to work with Solo as my service provider is that my business is entirely based on digital products. I don't sell or trade any physical products. It's as simple as that. But don't panic, there are plenty of other options available to you. Simply filter the e-Residency marketplace by industry here and then, for example, select e-commerce, Amazon FBA, or down here, physical goods, trading, retail. Choosing a service provider for your business is an important process, and so I highly recommend that you browse through this platform and thoroughly look at the details, services, and restrictions of potential service providers before you get in touch with them. One of the most important tips and probably the best advice I can give you is that you speak to your potential service provider about banking options for your business. We'll talk about banking in a separate chapter later in the video, but trust me, start this discussion with your service provider right at the beginning when you first present your business plans and ideas to them. Now, much earlier in the video when we looked at the overview of the entire process, I mentioned that choosing a service provider could in some cases also be done even before you apply for e-Residency. Remember? The reason for that is that some service providers let you start their sign-up or onboarding process before you have obtained your e-Residency. This could be helpful if you want to evaluate your options and discuss your individual situation with different service providers before even deciding on becoming an e-resident and setting up a company in Estonia. But obviously, in order to be able to then actually register your company, you need to have your e-Residency. Which brings us to step 3, submit your company registration. Most service providers support you from the beginning when you need to register your company. And since you have already signed up with the service provider of your choice by now, all you have to do now is to tell them what you prepared in step 1, which is your business description, main area of activity, and the name of your company. Your service provider will then prepare the registration application for you and guide you through the process. All you finally have to do is to log into the registration portal with your e-Residency card and digitally sign the application, pay the state fee for the registration, and submit your application. At the time of recording, the state fee for the company registration is €265. On top of that, there is the state service fee for the company online registration in the Estonian Business Registry, which is currently €25 plus VAT. So the total cost for the registration of your company is therefore €295, VAT included. Now, just to give you the full picture here, you could also submit your registration directly on the company registration portal, but this makes no sense. Why? Because you already use a service provider, which you need anyway as the local contact. So let them do the work for you and don't spend your own time on these tasks. They know exactly what to do and the whole process becomes much easier and much faster for you. And yes, the costs would be the same if you did the registration yourself. So now that you are the owner of an Estonian private limited company, congratulations, let's talk about the final step of establishing your company, which is your share capital contribution. If you don't know what share capital is, let me summarize it like this. Share capital is the amount of money the owners of a company have invested in the business for use in the business. Now, share capital requirements for private limited companies vary from country to country and can range anywhere from $0 to several tens of thousands of dollars. For an Estonian private limited company, the amount most usually paid in also corresponds to the required minimum share capital contribution, which is comparatively low at €2,500. So you as the founder are required to pay this amount into your Estonian company as the share capital, which you are then free to use in your business operations. But here comes the great thing. Normally, the share capital contribution must be paid upon the establishment of a company, not so in Estonia. You can establish your company without making the share capital contribution during the establishment process, because the payment can be deferred and you can even pay the total amount in installments. Speaking of money, once your company has been registered, the last important step in getting everything set up is to open a business bank account for your company so that you can make and accept payments. Also, this business bank account of your company is where you have to transfer your share capital contribution to, which we've just talked about. Before we go into this, I hope you have already discussed this topic with your service provider, as I urged you to do earlier in the video, because there will never be a single best solution for every company or even available to every company. I must also mention here that the banks and financial institutions we're going to talk about are private companies, so they are free to decide whether to accept or reject customers. While most of the tools needed to run a location-independent company are accessible by the vast majority of e-residents, access to business banking services is not guaranteed. These financial institutions must follow international regulations, so if you are connected to what is considered a high-risk country, you will most likely have difficulty or be unable to access any kind of business banking services, even with a company registered in Estonia. That's why I said that the most important advice I can give you is that you address this topic during the initial discussions with potential service providers for your company. So with that in mind, let's have a look at the 3 options you now have as an e-resident. 1. You apply for a business bank account in Estonia. 2. You apply for a business payments account through a fintech company that is licensed in the EU. 3. You apply for a business bank account at a bank operating in the EEA. Now let's look at the most important details of each of these options and get straight to the point. It makes no sense to go into every little detail because every company and every individual situation is very different. Option 1. Business bank account in Estonia. You're most likely to be able to open a business bank account in an Estonian bank if you meet one or both of the following criteria. 1. Your company has a connection to Estonia. What this means is that you need to prove that your existing business activities or explain that your future business operations have a connection to Estonia, which could include employees, for example, or relationships with suppliers or partners, or actually serving the Estonian market. 2, and this probably applies to the majority of e-residents that use Estonia's location-independent business environment, your company is run by a single shareholder. This basically covers most digital entrepreneurs that work as freelancers, digital nomads, etc. The reasoning behind this second criteria is that it's quite simple for banks to monitor the risks associated with single shareholder companies. Now, when it comes to applying for a business bank account in Estonia, and I know I keep repeating myself here, talk to your service provider first, especially because opening a bank account requires a face-to-face meeting with a bank representative, which means that you have to travel to Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. This has nothing to do with e-residency, but only with international anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism laws and regulations that the banks have to comply with. So while your service provider cannot make any decision on behalf of a bank, nor can they guarantee that you will be able to open an account, they can assist you. Going back to my service provider, Solo, as an example, due to their close cooperation with LHV, which is the most commonly used Estonian bank by e-residents, Solo was able to get me pre-acceptance for a bank account. This means that I received an email from LHV Bank confirming in advance that I had been accepted as a customer and that I could go to Tallinn for the face-to-face meeting. By the way, you can filter for business banking and payment service providers on the e-Residency marketplace to see possible options. Now let's continue to option 2, fintech business account. This part of the video is going to be much shorter because opening an account with a fintech company rather than with a traditional bank, as we've just discussed, is the easiest and fastest option for e-residents, especially in the beginning. Many e-residents choose to use payment institutions such as Wise or Payoneer because they offer the most flexible business banking services for location-independent companies, and you can open your business account entirely online. No need for a face-to-face meeting. So for example, you could get started with just a Wise business account, which you can open online, and then later, once your company meets additional criteria, you could open another business bank account in a traditional bank. There is an increasingly large number of fintech companies working globally, some of which often focus on niche features such as payment processing for e-commerce companies or accounting tools designed for solopreneurs and freelancers, etc. As I showed you a few minutes ago, you can find a list of services on the e-Residency marketplace. Please note that this does not mean that you cannot use other payment institutions if they suit your needs. But as always, I recommend you check with your service provider. Now, the last option is option 3, business bank account in the EEA. If we were to sort the 3 options by numbers of e-residents, option 2 would be the one with the most, option 1 would be in the middle, and this option 3 here with the fewest e-residents. The reason for this is that in order to be able to open a business bank account in an EEA country, you have to be a resident of one of these countries in the first place. If you are, then you could maybe open a business bank account for your Estonian company in your country, especially if you already have a relationship with a bank. Now, while these banks may not be familiar with the Estonian e-residency or location-independent entrepreneurship, they may know you already as their customer. So it's much easier for the bank to conduct the due diligence necessary. Also, a bank account in your country might be a better option if you are mainly operating your company there, for example. Before we move on to the next chapter, I'd like to point you to this detailed banking comparison page on the e-Residency knowledge base, where you can learn more about everything we just talked about. You know the drill, the link's down below. Now on to the part that most people would very much like to ignore. But of course, we can't just not talk about this topic, especially as business owners. Before we get into the details, I probably have to mention this here. This is not tax advice, it's only general guidance and an overview of what you have to be aware of. International taxation is very complex and determining corporate and individual tax obligations can get very challenging. While each individual case is different and each country has its own laws and regulations, some service providers that you can find on the e-Residency marketplace can advise on international taxation. When it comes to your personal tax situation, I strongly recommend you seek local professional tax advice at your place of residence. Also, you can learn more on the e-Residency knowledge base, the website of the Estonian Tax and Customs Board, and in this business guide for e-residents that you can download as a PDF file. All the links will be down below. Now let's start with the basics. You are not your company, and your individual residency is not your company's residency. Companies pay corporate taxes, individuals pay personal income taxes at their tax residency. You as an individual person and your Estonian company are two different legal entities. This is very important to understand. So let's have a look at the four main categories of taxes you should be aware of as an e-resident and owner of an Estonian company. But let me add that we're not going to go into all the details and cover dozens of possible combinations that may or may not apply to you. That would make the already very long video even much longer and it would be pretty boring too. Therefore, this is going to be more of a breakdown of the most important topics that you should know or at least have heard about. You'll find all the relevant links down below so that you can get into the details and figure out exactly what applies to you and your business. 1. Personal income tax. As just mentioned, you as an individual person declare and pay personal income tax based on your personal income in your country of tax residence, which is in most cases also your country of residence. This could include a salary that you pay yourself as an employee from your Estonian company. One exception you have to be aware of as an e-resident is the board members or director's fee that you could pay yourself for work you do in the role as the director of your Estonian company. This fee has to be declared in Estonia and you have to pay a flat personal income tax of 20%. And you are also liable to pay social tax of 33% on this income in Estonia. However, you could be exempt from paying these social taxes in Estonia if you are already covered by a social security scheme in another country in the EEA or a country with which Estonia has a treaty to avoid double taxation of social taxes, which at the time of recording include Australia, Switzerland, Canada and Ukraine. Now, if you are a digital nomad and are not a tax resident anywhere, then things get even more complicated. But as I said, we're not going to cover each and every possible case and instead I'll leave relevant links in the video description, which of course also includes the link to this complete digital nomad tax guide here. 2. Corporate taxes. Your Estonian company is an Estonian tax resident and therefore subject to corporate taxes in Estonia. However, your company could under certain circumstances also be considered tax resident in another country and therefore have tax liabilities there. But Estonia has signed tax treaties with more than 60 countries to avoid double taxation, so just because your company might have dual tax liabilities doesn't mean that it has to pay double. The key term to remember in this context when you get into the details is permanent establishment, which is a concept made up for tax purposes. At the beginning of the video I mentioned that Estonia has a unique corporate tax system. The reason for this statement is based on the fact that most countries tax companies on their annual income, whereas this is not the case in Estonia. Companies in Estonia pay no corporate tax on their annual income and submit no annual tax returns regardless of profit or loss. Your company also pays 0% tax on reinvested profits, or in other words, as long as the profits that your company earns are being used and reinvested in your company, those profits are not subject to tax. Instead, your company pays a standard rate of 20% on distributed profits such as dividends or taxable expenses, which explains the previously mentioned 20% on the director's fee. The standard rate reduces to just 14% if dividend payments are regular over 3 years. One misconception that I've heard quite a few times and that I would like to clear up here is about paying yourself a salary from your Estonian company. If you operate outside Estonia and pay yourself a salary which is classified as an employee salary, which in turn means that this is a business expense of your company does not have to pay any taxes on it. What you as an individual have to do, of course, is to declare and pay your personal income taxes on this salary, as we have just discussed in the previous section. Still with me? If you're already a bit confused right now, this proves the point that things can get complex and therefore you should seek advice and make sure to get your tax affairs in order for both your company and yourself. 3. Social taxes. The third category of taxes you should know about is social taxes, or as they are called in other countries, payroll taxes, labor taxes, social contributions, etc. In general, you have to declare social taxes where the employees of your company are located and registered. This also includes you if you are receiving a salary as an employee of your company. If your Estonian company has employees in Estonia, you have to register them there because in this case Estonia's laws on payroll taxes and social contributions apply. 4. VAT. The fourth category, the value-added tax or VAT, also known as goods and services tax or GST, is a consumption tax that applies to all digital or physical goods or services sold. The standard VAT rate in Estonia is 20%, but there are also rates of 9 and 0%. Which of those rates applies depends on the services or products you sell, the type of customer you serve, that is business to business or business to consumer, and also the customer's location, in Estonia, in the EU or outside the EU. While you can start selling your products and services without a VAT number, you must register your Estonian company as a VAT payer once the turnover reaches 40,000 euro from the beginning of a calendar year. And or your company participates in OSS or IOSS schemes. OSS means one-stop shop, which is a simplified way to collect and pay VAT. It's designed for companies selling goods from one EU member state to customers in other EU countries. IOSS stands for Import One-Stop Shop, and as the name suggests, this scheme is designed for companies that sell low-value goods, not exceeding 150 euro, imported into the EU to customers in the EU. We're gonna stop here, but keep these terms in mind when you go into the details of the VAT. So, as you would expect, VAT rules are very complex, because of course they are. The best advice I can give you, again, is to speak to your service provider, who will most likely also help you with the VAT registration and the monthly reporting and compliance. Now, before I'm going to share my personal experience of being a new resident and running my Estonian company remotely over the last 3 years, and how it all came to be in the first place, let me ask you. Since you're watching this video, I assume you are interested in this subject, so let me know in the comments below. Are you already a new resident too, or do you consider becoming one? Are you interested in running a location-independent business, or do you already own one? Also, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you want to learn more about building automated and location-independent passive income systems. So, why did I decide to become a new resident and register my company in Estonia? And how has my experience been so far? My main motivation has always been that I wanted to create an online business that is as location independent as possible. And so it was clear from the beginning that I didn't want to register my company in my home country. All the bureaucracy and especially the fact that it would be impossible for me to manage the company online and remotely were just some of the many reasons against it. I had to find another way, and that's when I learned about the Estonian e-Residency. I was immediately intrigued by this concept of a digital identity because it's exciting to see that there are countries coming up with innovative ideas that challenge our mostly outdated systems in today's technologically advanced world. And I like being part of that. Because let's face it, the amount of bureaucracy and paperwork and snail mail that still exists in our digital world is completely absurd. That's why I'm very happy to be a new resident and have my company Njavimi established in Estonia. So in a nutshell, for me it's not just about the outstanding convenience of being able to run and manage my business from anywhere in the world and completely paperless, it's the whole ideology of this digital nation without borders that appeals to me and I can identify with. Now, what I just said about setting up my business as location independent as possible obviously implies that I wanted to start a purely digital business without any physical products. And as you already know if you've watched the whole video, this fully digital setup and being a solopreneur made it possible for me to select Solo as my service provider. They are basically my all-in-one solution and their team handles all the accounting and administrative work of my business for me. All I need to do each month is to log into my Solo self-service portal, upload my expense and income documents and receipts, etc. And that's it. This only takes a few minutes of my time instead of hours if I had to do everything myself. Needless to say, I'm very satisfied with Solo and can definitely recommend them. Earlier in the video I explained that you can sign up with the service provider of your choice before applying for your e-residency. And that's what I did with Solo. I first got in touch with them to check whether I could become their customer with my business idea. Within a day or so, I got a positive reply so that I could sign up with Solo. The onboarding process on their portal was very smooth and I was guided through step by step all the way from getting my e-residency to setting up my company. And because this is probably what you're most curious about, here's an overview of the time and money I actually needed to get everything done. Now, keep in mind that things may have changed since then, which is the case with the application fees. First, we have my e-residency application, which cost me €100 from the day I submitted my application until I received the email confirming that I was granted e-residency. It took 15 days. During the application process, I chose the pickup location for my e-residency kit in another country because Estonia does not have an embassy in my home country. So my e-residency kit was sent to that location, and after another 20 days I received an email from the embassy that my kit was ready to be collected. I scheduled the pickup, booked my trip and received my residency kit after another 9 days. This city trip, which included a short flight and a hotel stay for 3 nights, was about €400 total. 1 day later, my new digital ID was activated. Right after that, I submitted my application for the company registration, which can be done very quickly if you're prepared. The total cost for the state fees was €220. It was also at that time that my first monthly fee for Solo was due, so we have to add another €60. 1 day later, I received the email confirmation that my company had been registered in the Estonian e-business register. 1 day. So when we look at this, it took me from applying for my e-residency to being the owner of my registered company a total of 50 days. So about 7 weeks, and the total cost was €780. Now that my company had been established, I was able to set up my business bank accounts. As I explained earlier, in my individual case, Solo was able to get me pre-acceptance for an LHV business bank account. This happened after 9 days. I then scheduled my trip to Tallinn and met the bank representative exactly 1 week later to formally open my bank account. The total cost for this trip, which was another 3-night trip with flight and Airbnb, was €480. The bank account opening fee was €100. So all in all, the entire process took 68 days or about 10 weeks and cost around €1,360. However, keep in mind that these amounts here, 60 for Solo, 480 for the trip to Tallinn, and 100 for the account opening, were at this point considered business expenses of my company, which I could later reimburse to myself out of my company profits. So you see that for my company setup, I needed to go on 2 trips. The first one is definitely always required to pick up your e-residency kit, but you can skip the second one if you start setting up your business banking with a fintech company such as Wise. Now, you might either see these trips as an unnecessary waste of time and money, or as an opportunity for an extended weekend and a short trip. It's all about perspective. For me, there was nothing negative about it. These 2 short city trips were great because I could finally see 2 places I've always wanted to travel to anyway, which is the whole point of having a location-independent business, to be able to travel more. And that's pretty much the big picture and all you need to know about the Estonian e-residency program. From getting your e-residency to establishing your location-independent company remotely and understanding how banking and taxation work. Now, before we come to the end of this video, let's look at the final summary of the entire process with all the times and costs. Quick disclaimer here. Of course, I cannot guarantee any deadlines or costs I'm going to show you now. These figures are based on the data provided by the official e-residency platform and my personal experience that I share with you in the previous chapter. So let's have a look. The first step is your e-residency application. Let's say the first task of preparing all your documents takes you 4 hours, which obviously depends on whether your CV is up to date and how long you actually need to describe your planned business and write the motivation statement. Next, you create your account, which is negligible time-wise as it only takes a few minutes. You then complete your application, which should take around 30 minutes if you're well prepared, but let's round that up to 1 hour. Once you're done, you submit and pay your application, which is €120 if you remember. And now you wait for 3 to 8 weeks for the background check to be completed. I can't tell why it can vary so much, probably depending on the number of applications coming in, the time required for the background checks, and the data exchange with different countries, etc. If you receive the confirmation email that you're granted e-residency, then your e-residency kit will be shipped to the pickup location you chose during the application. As you know, in my case, this took 20 days, so let's just say 3 weeks, maybe. When your e-residency kit is ready to be collected, you schedule the exact date and plan your trip to that location. The time and cost for this very much depend on where you go and how long your trip is. In my case, it was a 3-night trip with a total cost of €400. Let's go with that as a rough estimate. To sum up, time you need to invest yourself 5 hours plus planning and going on your trip. The total waiting time is about 6 to 11 weeks and cost of around €520. Step 2 is the company registration process. So again, prepare all the information, business description, company name, etc. Say 4 hours again. Next, choose your service provider. This can take a few days depending on your needs. Quick tip here to use your time wisely. Evaluate your options and maybe already choose your service provider during those 3 to 8 weeks you have to wait for e-residency. The submission of your company registration application should take an hour max when you're prepared and supported by your service provider. Total costs are €295. Waiting time for registration confirmation, maximum 2 days. This results in about 5 hours EU time, plus a few days to select your service provider. A waiting time of 2 days max and cost of €295. And that's it. If you now go forward with fintech companies such as Wise for your business banking, no additional costs are required and the application for Wise can be done quickly online. Should you choose to open a business bank account with a bank in Estonia, you need another few hours to clarify the details with your service provider and the bank. Let's say another 4 hours total. Then you need to wait for the confirmation of the pre-acceptance, as it was in my case, say around 2 weeks. And finally, you need to pay around €100 for the account opening, plus the costs for the trip to Tallinn to meet the bank representative. In my case, that was another 3-night trip for around €480. So, the bottom line is, without a traditional bank account, you need to spend around 10 hours of your time, plus of course the time needed to find your service provider and the trip to pick up your e-residency kit. The total waiting time is somewhere from 6 to 11 weeks, and the total cost is in the order of €800. If you go with a traditional bank account instead, then it all adds up to around 14 hours of your time plus the time for now 2 trips. The waiting time is a bit longer, up to 8 to 13 weeks. And the total cost increases to around €1,400, but largely depending on how much you spend on your trips. One thing you may notice here is that I didn't mention the share capital contribution of €2,500, simply because this amount is not money spent to a third party, but invested into your company. So yes, technically you spent €2,500 from your private money, but you can use all of it in your business. And to remind you again, you can make this contribution later and in installments. I paid mine almost 2 years after I registered my company, and I did it in 3 installments. On my channel, I've previously used the phrase systems to freedom in a few video descriptions, which refers to the strategy of building systems and automations to turn your business into passive income as much as possible. Building blocks 1 and 2 are online sales funnels and email marketing automations. And part 3 is this here. Location independent, e-residency, and outsourcing of administration, accounting, compliance, taxes, etc. to your service provider. Once your systems are in place, all that's left for you to do apart from the occasional maintenance of those systems is to keep adding digital assets, which is your content that feed the systems with traffic. And traffic means people, new leads, new customers. If you want to take it even one step further to the ultimate level, you want to use affiliate products instead of your own. With this, you completely free yourself from every task related to fulfillment and customer service as well. This is what systems to freedom mean. Automation and outsourcing, so you can focus on what's important to you and have more time to do the things you love. I've put all the relevant videos in a YouTube playlist with the same name, so you can watch them in one go. While we have covered a lot in this video that certainly helps you get started should you consider becoming a new resident and joining our global community, we can go into even more details if you are interested. Down below in the description you'll find a link to my free Succeeder Secrets e-Residency and Company course, which is the last in a series of currently 4 free courses. However, at the time of recording, this course has not yet been published. But when you click the link, you can sign up for the waitlist. In return for joining the waitlist, you'll get an overview of the currently planned modules and have the chance to complete the short questionnaire and express your wishes regarding the topics you would like to see included in this free course. Depending on when you watch this video in the future, all the Succeeder Secrets courses will already be live and the questionnaire is no longer available. So check it out, it's free. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Please like and subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on future videos about starting and growing your successful online business. I'm Sascha Meier, helping you succeed smarter.